From VOA, Learning English, this is the Science Report. Some scientists have long wondered about the way fish eat their food. Fish are vertebrates. This means they have a spine or backbone, and they have gills that help them take oxygen out of water. But the movements fish make while eating can be especially interesting. Many fish are power eaters. Bass, for example, can eat goldfish in one big swallow. Thomas Roberts teaches biology at Brown University in Rhode Island. He and his team recorded the movements of bass as the fish were eating. The researchers used high-speed X-ray videos and computed tomography images, known as CT scans. The recordings showed bones in the skull of the bass. The researchers also measured the pressure in the water while it was feeding. Mr. Roberts says the muscles in the skull are not powerful enough to create that pressure. He says they must work together with other muscles used for swimming. Scientists had suspected this kind of cooperation in the past, but they had no proof until now. Mr. Roberts says bass use linkages between their skull bones and body to create a very fast movement and strong suction. The finding is important to understand how not only bass, but about 30,000 species of water vertebrates developed. Thomas Roberts says it also shows that fish co-opt swimming muscles to produce their feeding motion. He says this was important to the development of bony fishes, and it helped them succeed and survive. The findings were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. For VOA, Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. Researchers have published a report about the fossil of a mammal. It is 125 million years old. Scientists have named the new mammal type Spinolestis xenothrosis. Its discovery may prove that mammals lived 60 million years earlier than scientists had thought. The fossil was found in 2011. A team of researchers from the Autonomous University of Madrid, the University of Bonn in Germany, and the University of Chicago examined the fossil. They reported their findings in the journal Nature. They say the fossil includes the earliest known examples in the evolutionary history of mammals. The fossil represents the animal's hair, parts of its ear, and tissue from the liver and lung. One researcher called the fossil a spectacular find. He said such well-kept skin and hair structures are very rare for such an old fossil. Scientists found the fossil in central Spain, where a freshwater wetland once existed. Researchers say the animal was about 24 centimeters long and weighed between 50 and 70 grams. That is about the size of a young rat. They say its teeth and skeleton show that it lived on the ground and ate insects. The researchers say its hair and skin were similar to that of modern mammals. They saw several hairs formed from the same skin pore. The animal also had tiny spines on its back. The fossil was in such good condition that scientists were able to see that it suffered from a type of skin infection, one that living mammals still get today. For VOA Learning English, I'm Ann Ball.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. Plants have a biological clock that tells them when to grow leaves and produce seeds. Understanding that clock may help scientists develop crops to feed a growing population in an increasingly warmer world. Experts have said the expected growth in the production of major food crops would not be enough to support the human population by 2050. Rob McClung is a biologist at Dartmouth College in the United States. He says scientists need to create ways to feed the almost 10 billion people expected by the middle of the 21st century. He says estimates show that the world's food supply will have to increase by about 50 to 60% over the next 35 years. To find new ways to increase productivity, Mr. McClung studied the biological clocks of plants. He found that different genes in plants affect the clock. His findings were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Rob McClung says he identified a gene called gigantea in a common species of field mustard. The plant is related to turnips and other vegetables. The gene speeds up or slows down the rate of development in the plant. That influences genetic traits like resistance to extreme cold and high salt. Mr. McClung says the hope is to give researchers a molecular tool to produce more crops. He says they might use this information to make a crop that can accept a higher level of salt or grow in a colder climate. Mr. McClung hopes that by working with the plant clock, researchers will be able to develop plants that perform more effectively. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. Grasslands cover 1/3 of the Earth's surface. They are known by many names, such as savanna, prairie, steppes, or plains. The health of grasslands depends on how much animals graze on them. If too many animals feed on the plants, the area could become a desert. But too little grazing can also be bad for grasslands. The Great Plains covers a large area in the middle of the United States. A lot of it is grasslands. The area is known for large cattle ranches. A growing number of environmental groups are joining with local ranchers to improve the health of grasslands and make their businesses more profitable. Steve Hicks directs the Niobrara Wildlife Refuge for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. One of its goals is to protect native plants and animals. 300 years ago, 20 million bison lived on prairies in the American Midwest. The bison traveled thousands of kilometers each year, seeking food and fleeing other animals that hunted them. Their grazing helped the grasslands stay healthy. Their waste also helped the plants grow. Today, the country has only about 30,000 wild bison. They mostly live in fenced-in areas on public land. 350 bison live on 9,000 hectares at Fort Niobrara. The Fish and Wildlife Service also lets cattle ranchers use about 25,000 hectares of the government's land. The animals never graze a pasture continuously. And instead of letting a pasture rest for years, they often bring cattle back within a few months. This can also help improve the grass. For VOA Learning English, I'm Jonathan Evans.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Science Report. The hippopotamus is an animal very important to the health of Africa's rivers and lakes. Its dung or solid waste helps Africa's water ecosystem. But researchers warn that hippopotamus populations are decreasing. They say that could damage ecosystems, everything that lives in an environment. Also called hippos, they are the third largest land mammal after the elephant and rhinoceros. Hippos spend as much as 16 hours a day in the water. They go on land at night to feed. They eat more than 40 kilograms of grasses at each feeding. They return to the water where they release their waste. Douglas McCauley is an assistant science professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He and his team studied the waste of hippos. He says there are a lot of nutrients, substances needed for life, that move throughout the environment through hippos' food and their waste. He says scientists are interested in how these nutrients move across systems. Mr. McCauley says living on both the land and in water means hippos are important providers of nutrients. Every year, hippos provide over 60,000 kilograms of dung to African lakes and rivers. The study showed that some species of river fish need the dung in their diets. Mr. McCauley says some of the nutrients in the dung are the building materials of life. But as researchers learn more about the importance of hippos, there are fewer of them. Mr. McCauley says across sub-Saharan Africa, there has been a 10 to 20% drop in the past 10 years. He says humans are responsible for most of the drop in the hippo population. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.